Are you looking for a wet and dry vacuum cleaner but ain't sure which appliance is best for you? If so, you come to the right place. We're testing 8 of the most popular appliances in this video, and you'll find out everything you need to know, so just stay tuned. Let's go. Let's start with our comparison of the wet and dry vacuum cleaners. We have divided the whole thing into a total of 3 price categories. We have 2 well-known brands in the lower price segment, namely Veleda and Lifehite. In the mid-range, we have the appliance from Bissell, and in the higher price range, we come to the devices with smart functions. In this regard, we've tested the S3 and S5 models from Tenneco. We also included some similar products to the typical wet and dry vacuum cleaner in this comparison. These are the so-called hard floor cleaners from the Karcher brand. We have reviewed one of these appliances for each price category: the FC3 for the low price range, the FC5 for the mid-range, and the FC7 for the higher price segment. You can find the links to the products below the video in the description. And if you want to find out more details about one of the devices, we have also linked our individual reviews for you there. Next, we come to the cleaning performance. To be able to evaluate this properly, we first need to look at how wet and dry vacuum cleaners and hard floor cleaners differ from each other. We will now hear more about this from our colleague Remo. Well, now I'm sitting here at the table and have 2 appliances with me, namely the Karcher FC7, which is a hard floor cleaner, and the Tenneco S5, a wet and dry vacuum cleaner. Both appliances have the job of picking up dirt from the floor, and apparently both types of appliances do the same thing, as they work on a 2-tank system. Fresh water is supplied from the fresh water tank down to the cleaning brushes. The cleaning brush then picks up the dirt and then feeds it into the dirty water tank. But this is where the difference lies. With a typical wet and dry vacuum cleaner, the dirt is sucked into the dirty water tank. But that's not what the hard floor cleaner does. There is no suction in this case. This means that the wet and dry vacuum devices typically are more powerful, which enables them to pick up coarse soiling, even with solid particles. And this is where hard floor cleaners sometimes struggle a little. They are also more of an electric mopping tool, which are more suitable for light to medium amounts and quality of dirt. However, the Karcher FC7 is an exception here, as it is so powerful that it can actually compete with 1 or 2 wet and dry vacuum cleaners. Well then, let's see what the appliances can do. In regards to the cleaning performance, we have put together several difficulty levels for you so that you can better assess how far you can go with the appliances. We start by going easy, level 1A, dry dirt. On the right, we see some instant cappuccino powder, and on the left, we have a few sprinkles. And here's an overview of the results. As you can see, the classical wet and dry vacuum cleaners cope very well with dry dirt. The Tenneco appliances in particular stand out. Obviously, such dirt is not a problem here. 2 sweeps and that's it. However, as you can see with Lifehite, it doesn't necessarily have to be a high-priced appliance to pick up everything. You can achieve a solid cleaning result in just a few strokes in this case as well. The inexpensive Veleda, on the other hand, is not quite as convincing. It pushes the sprinkles away. And to top it off, it leaves out quite a bit, even after going over our sprinkles several times. Among the hard floor cleaners, the FC7 performs quite well, even if it spreads the sprinkles around the room a little. The smaller FC3 and FC5 series are also still in the race. However, you can already see the first problems. The sprinkles are practically shot away by the brush system, which is, of course, not very practical in everyday use. So much for our first section. Now let's take a look at the next challenge. Level 1B, liquid stuff. For this challenge, we spread a load of juice on the floor. The overview shows that this is not a problem for most of the devices. Accordingly, only a few appliances stand out negatively. Once again, this includes the Veleda, which apparently also pushes liquids around a bit. The FC5 also does seem to have its problems in this case. It's simply applying too much water to the brushes, and then spreads the juice and water mixture around the room. In comparison, we were pleasantly surprised by the Karcher FC3, which is a size smaller than its big brother, but still did a much better job. So much for the first level. Let's now combine dry and liquid dirt and move on to level 2, Viscous dirt. Yogurt, ketchup, and applesauce should actually be a little more difficult to pick up. But as you can see, most appliances do surprisingly well here. Once again, the Tineco appliances prove to be completely unimpressed by the mess. With Karcher's hard floor cleaners, the gap between the brushes results in a streak of dirt being left behind, which then has to be removed with corrective sweeps. Apart from this, however, the Karcher appliances also cope quite well with this type of dirt. The only negative outlier here is the FC5, which, as with the Juice, tends to mix the dirt with water, and thus smears it over a large area. After several sweeps it works reasonably well, but it could have been a little better. So much for the viscous stuff. Things get really interesting in our next section. Level 3A. Cornflakes with milk. Liquids with solid components. In other words, wet, coarse dirt. At least most of these appliances advertise that this should not be a problem at all. In reality, however, you can see how some devices reach their limits. Once again, the Tineco appliances stood out positively, especially with this kind of dirt. You can clearly see that the built-in iLoop technology is not just a gimmick. The vacuum power is automatically adapted to the dirt situation, which actually improves the cleaning results in the end. The bottom line is, one sweep to the front and one to the back, and your job is done. On the other hand, it is a little more difficult with appliances in the lower price range. Even the Bissell from the mid-price range does the job, but by no means as easily as one of the Tineco appliances. The hard floor cleaners from Karcher are even more of a mess. The smaller series in particular tend to tear up the flakes and spread them around the room. A little bit is picked up, but there is no real cleaning here. The exception to this is Karcher's big brother, the FC7, which can still keep up with the wet and dry cleaners. Of course, we don't want to be unjust in regards to the FC3 and FC5. We wanted to see how far you can go with these appliances, but we are of course aware that these hard floor cleaners are simply not made for this type of dirt. If the area of application is geared more towards minor soiling instead, things look a lot different. Muddy footprints? No problem. Dried-in dirt is also no challenge if you let the brush do its work. And even some of the things that might accumulate under the table are at least halfway under control with these appliances. But there's not much more. That's why we're now putting these appliances on hold and continue with the FC7 and the wet and dry cleaners. And as a reminder, you can find the links to the individual reviews and to the products below the video in the description. And if the video was helpful to you, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. We're still on the topic of wet coarse dirt and are now adding a scoop on top. Level 3B, canned corn. The liquid shouldn't be a problem. But what about the relatively large and firm pieces of corn? As a result, most of the remaining appliances can more or less cope with it. In the usual manner, the Tineco appliances show what they can do. Admittedly, in the case of the corn, it is a little bumpier, but the bottom line is that it is still very effortless and can be done in just a few moves. Also worth mentioning at this point is Karcher's FC7. Although this type of hard floor cleaner has no suction power, it still copes quite well with corn. You can see how the dirt builds up at the tank opening, and you also need several strokes until everything is clean. But in the end, the result is convincing. The Jet Clean from Veleda and the Lifehite Regulus have a lot more to struggle with here. The Jet Clean's intake slot is too small, so that such dirt cannot be picked up effectively, and is simply pushed away or gets caught on the base. The Regulus has a similar problem. Although the intake slot seems large enough, it also pushes a lot of dirt in front of it. The bottom line is that these appliances are not entirely convincing in this respect. So far, so good. Now we come to one of the biggest challenges for the devices and thus to our boss level: raw egg with its shell. The raw egg itself is usually not a problem. The real challenge is the shell. If you look at the results, you can see that the appliances have performed very differently. However, once again, the Tineco appliances came out on top in our review. As you can see, the gooey stuff is picked up effortlessly. In contrast, the eggshell is not so easily removed. The brush flattens the shell and pushes it backwards, where most of it is sucked up. Nevertheless, it is possible that shell residues are not completely pressed into the dirty water tank. When you lift the cleaner, they fall onto the floor. It's not quite as nice, but to be honest, it's also complaining at a high level. The other appliances are quite similar in this respect, but don't quite come close to the results of the Tineco appliances. Only the FC7 also manages to flatten the shell. Although it repeatedly ejects shell components due to a lack of suction assistance, it at least manages to flatten the shell. If you take a closer look at Bissell, for example, you can see that the shell doesn't even get through the intake slot. Instead, it is simply pushed away. From our point of view, we have covered the essentials. As many of you probably have a bunch of children at home who like to drag in dirt from outside, let's take a short detour on the subject of sand and mud. First, let's look at the results again. As you can see, this is where the devices finally differentiate from one another very clearly. The tough and sticky mud is not always easy for the devices, especially when there is a lot of it on the floor. In reality, it is once again the Tenneco appliances that stand out positively. Admittedly, the cleaning brush also drags the dirt behind it a little, but the approach here is, just go over it again and then it'll be fine. The Bissell was also convincing here, delivering a similarly good result. The Jet Clean, on the other hand, does not cope so well with this type of dirt. It still manages reasonably well with sand. With mud, however, as is so often the case, you notice that it pushes the dirt in front of it. In addition, some of the mud sticks to the bottom of the base, leaving mud streaks across the floor when you pull it back. Unfortunately, that's not quite so nice. It is also interesting what we found out about the FC7 in this regard. Although the FC7 generally copes well with the mud, the bar in the middle between the brushes proved to be a problem. Even with thick liquids, you could see that it wasn't being cleaned, and therefore a streak of dirt always remained. Here with mud, the appliance does it a little better. As the pile of mud is high enough to reach the bar, dirt is trapped here, leaving a trail of mud behind with every sweep you make. This is not a disqualifying factor, but to be honest, it is a bit annoying. All in all, if we look at the overall rating in terms of cleaning performance, we have to rank the FC7 a little behind the Tenneco appliances. Nevertheless, it can be said that our review has shown that the FC7 is not just a simple electric mop, but can also do at least some vacuum cleaning work. Despite its designation as a hard floor cleaner and the fact that it does not vacuum, the appliance comes very close to being like a wet and dry vacuum cleaner. And not only that, it even leaves most appliances behind in terms of performance. Nevertheless, the Tenneco devices come out on top in terms of the overall rating. We were downright surprised at how easily and effortlessly these devices picked up dirt. A well-coordinated, well-thought-out appliance and sophisticated smart support make this possible. Our second place goes to the Bissell Crosswave, which also delivered good results. This is also the only appliance which we reviewed that offers the option of carpet cleaning in addition to hard floors. If you want to find out a little more, take a look at the description below the video. As already mentioned, you will also find the links to the individual reviews in addition to the product links. We go much more into detail there, whether it's edge and joint cleaning, tiles, cleaning under furniture, battery issues, and so on. Check these out if you want to find out even more. So we've reviewed these appliances for you. Stay tuned if you want to check our other videos. Our end card will provide a few interesting video suggestions. And if this video was helpful to you, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel.